Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ben here. I'm back again today doing another video, and the subject of today's video is going to be me going through all the starting power forwards in the NBA for the upcoming 2019-20 season. I'm going to be ranking them from the worst being 30th to the best being number 1. Obviously, this is for projected starting lineups. If somebody gets injured and goes down, then obviously that would change things. But based on what projected starting lineups are, I'm going to be going through here. I'll give a little bit of reasoning for each, but not a ton, because if I did for 30 players, the video would be super long. So some will be a little bit longer than others, but most will be relatively short explanations. And without further ado, let's get into it. So starting off at 30, I have Sam Dekker for the Washington Wizards. Sam Dekker is a guy who's very limited. He has a decent jump shot. He can hit a few threes. His three-point percentage isn't actually that good, but he has been a little streaky and good from time to time. The Wizards are very weak on the forward slots, so he's probably the slotted starting power forward. So I have him here at 30, and basically because all he can do is shoot, and even that he's pretty inconsistent at. So he's at 30. 29, I have Patrick Patterson. I have him here because I don't think that they'll start he plays for the Thunder, by the way. I don't think the Thunder will start Nerlens Noel next to Steven Adams. I also don't think that they'll start Gallinari as a power forward, so I think Patrick Patterson is really the only option, considering they traded Jeremy Grant. So Patrick Patterson, again, another guy. He can shoot some three-pointers, but he's inconsistent. The only thing he really has over Sam Dekker is that he's taller and has more experience, so I have him here at 29. At 28, I think that Luka Mbah-a-Moute will start at power forward for the Clippers. Obviously, they have a better power forward on the roster in Montrezl Harrell, but he is more like a sixth-man, seventh-man type, so I don't think that they'll be starting him. I think that he'll be coming off the bench. So that leaves really a void, and I don't think that they're necessarily comfortable with Kawhi playing power forward. Paul George is a little too skinny to play power forward, so I think that they'll probably start Luka Mbah-a-Moute there. He may not even play that much, maybe only like 12 to 15 minutes a night, but I think he will be the starter. And he's a pretty good defender and a pretty good spacer, but he was injured almost all of last year, so we don't really know how he's going to come back. So he's a little bit lower here than he might normally be, but that's more based on injuries, and I think he's around 33 now, so he's getting a little older too. So that's for the Clippers. At 27 for the Minnesota Timberwolves, I have Jordan Bell. He basically has been the backup on the Warriors for the past couple of years. He's a guy that can do some things well. Like, he's athletic and he's a decent, basically like pick and roll guy. Can put the ball in the hoop when he's like within 5 feet of it, but doesn't do anything extraordinarily well. Doesn't do anything really bad either. He's not a great defender. He's like average to slightly below average. So yeah, he's just right here because he doesn't do anything particularly well or bad. Next, I have Zach Collins for the Portland Trailblazers. Without Mo Harkless or Al-Farouq Aminu, they really have a void here, and I think Zach Collins is going to be the guy to slot in because they're not going to start a guy like Rodney Hood at power forward. I don't think he's just not big enough, and Kent Bazemore will be playing small forward, I think. So it really leaves Zach Collins as the guy unless you want like Skal Labissiere to start, who I don't think is nearly experienced enough. Neither is Zach Collins really, but he's shown a little bit more talent. He can shoot some three-pointers. He has a decent offensive game. Defensively, he's nothing special, but that's why he's here, is that he's a pretty decent offensive presence. Next, I have James Johnson at 25 for the Miami Heat. A guy, again, he's not spectacular at anything, but he's good on defense. He can hit some corner three-pointers occasionally. He can space it a little bit, but just more he's getting on here because of his defensive presence and his ability to run the floor pretty well in like transition and stuff like that. He can ball handle a little. He's kind of like a good comparison to be like a poor man's Boris Diaw is James Johnson. So as you can tell, the power forward position is kind of weird because a lot of guys who play power forward now are actually playing out of position. But it's an evolving list, and we're just dealing with the position being a weird one in the NBA. Next, at 24 for the Nets, I have Taurean Prince, a decent young player. He can do a little bit of everything. He's a pretty good defender. He's not super athletic, but athletic enough. So he, as I say, defense is probably his calling card. Offensively, he can shoot it all right. like probably average to slightly above average on some nights, but overall just like an average offensive game with a pretty good defensive game. Next at 23, I have Kelly Oubre, who is pretty similar to Taurean Prince, I think, but just a bit more athletic. So that's basically why I ranked him above here, but similar game, like good defender. Offensively, he is a bit more explosive as far as dunking and stuff than Taurean Prince, so that's why he's a little bit higher. At 22, I have another guy who's similar to these last two, which is Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, another guy who in the old NBA would have been playing small forward, but now because of his lack of shooting, he's playing power forward. He shoots at the worst of any of these three guys between Oubre and Taurean Prince, but he's the most athletic at the same time. Again, a decent defender, definitely an underachiever from being the second overall pick previously, but still a decent player, and maybe shouldn't necessarily even be starting for an NBA team, but he's not the worst of the worst, obviously. Next, I have Joe Ingles at 21 for the Jazz. Again, a guy that normally has played small forward, but I think with Derek Favors leaving and him playing a little bit of power forward last year, also Jay Crowder leaving, that leaves a void of power forward, and I think Joe Ingles is going to be the one to fill it. He's a really good spacing power forward, like a I can't think of the term right now, but he's a floor spacer, a stretch four. He's a good stretch four. He can shoot threes and just create space for like Mitchell to drive and Mike Conley to drive. So he's a good, not great on defense, but pretty good spacing on offense. So he's in here at 21. At 20, I have PJ Tucker, who's kind of a similar player to Joe Ingles, like mainly offensively. He's just there for spacing. In the older NBA of a couple years ago, he'd be a small forward, but now with how things are trending, he's a power forward. Offensively, he's just there to space, but defensively, he's a pretty good defender, so I've got him in here at number 20. At number 19, I have Rudy Gay. Rudy Gay, again, a guy who normally would play small forward, but in today's NBA is playing power forward. He's a very good scorer in that he can give you on a given night anywhere between 15 to 25 points per game. It kind of depends on how the guys like Aldridge and DeMar DeRozan are doing on his team, but I think a guy who people have somewhat forgotten about, but is still a decent player, and I think should be given a little bit more regard than he is. He's not super efficient, but he's just a guy that can create his own shot, which is a valuable thing in today's NBA. He can space the floor okay. He's a decent three-point shooter, like I'd say average, but not above average. But he just is helpful, and that he's another ball handler and shot creator for this San Antonio offense that can sometimes get a little bit stagnant. Next, right here at 18, we have Paul Millsap. Paul Millsap is a four-time All-Star, a pretty good player. He has declined a little bit with age and this injury that he went through. Now it's technically 2 years ago. So he missed basically all of the 2017 to 18 season. I think he only played around 20 games. And last year when he came back, he was a little bit slower. I think he's definitely out of like the All-Star range now. Now he's more of just an above average NBA starter. He's still nothing to balk at though. I think that he can bring some valuable things to the offense, and that he's a good spacer, and that he can shoot some threes and longer mid-range shots. And then defensively, he's a little undersized, but he still gives a lot of effort on defense, so you got to value that. Let's see here. Next, we have at 17, Zion. You guys might think this is a little low for Zion, but I'm putting him down here just because he's basically a total unproven. Very undersized. Defense is decent, but that was in college when he was guarding guys that were his height or smaller than him at power forward, which will not be the case in the NBA. He'll be, I think like him and PJ Tucker will be like the smallest guys at his position. Everyone else will be taller than him, some significantly so, some just by a few inches. But so I think that would be a bigger disadvantage than people are thinking. He's only 6'6". But offensively, he's explosive. He can handle the ball. He can do some of everything. I'm just interested to see how that will translate to the NBA. I'm unsure at this point. I think he'll be a good player, but might take a few years. But just for this season, I have him here at 17 for power forwards. 16, I have Domantas Sabonis, good player, can do a little bit of everything on offense. He can score in the post, and he can also step out and take a mid-range shot or a three-pointer, so he can do some good spacing for you. He's around 6'11", so he's got good height for a power forward. He's an average defender, but he just has got a pretty good offensive game that complements the team well. And sometimes he plays center, but I think they're going to really stress the whole starting Miles Turner and Domantas Sabonis next to each other thing. So I have him here as power forward. Getting into the top half of our rankings here, at 15, I have Marvin Bagley, really raw and hasn't shown us too much yet, being only a sophomore going into this next year. But he had a promising offensive season. Defensively, he was not much of anything, but offensively, he could score in a variety of ways. He can actually step out and take a deeper mid-range shot, like a 15-footer occasionally, but very, very good in the post for a rookie. The next guy I have is also going into his sophomore year at 14 for the Memphis Grizzlies. That's Jaren Jackson. Again, he's going into his sophomore year, still really raw and undeveloped in a lot of ways, but he basically showed us everything, a similarly competent offensive game to Marvin Bagley, but the main difference here is that he was a really good defender his rookie season, so that's why I'm putting him above Marvin Bagley at 14. At 13, I have Aaron Gordon, who's a mystery to figure out in the NBA. Doesn't play much defense, but he's got a pretty good offensive game. I don't know what to make of him. He's not a great shooter, but he likes to think he is sort of a good shooter from three, but he's just like decent, not great. He's very explosive, obviously. He's probably the most explosive dunker in the NBA currently, so that's something to be proud of. And he can score in a few different ways, but he still has some definite limitations, I think. Next, at 12, I have John Collins. This might be a little bit higher than most people think he should be, but to me, John Collins is a really promising young player. He put up, I think, like 20 and 10 last year, and that was on a team where Trae Young was really good at helping assist him, so I think that might inflate his numbers a bit, but I think that he is still, this is only going to be his third season coming up. That was only his sophomore year last year. He's still developing quite a bit, and he seems so far to be sort of like a Julius Randle type, but I think he could end up being even better than Julius Randle. Defensively, not much, but offensively, really good so far. Next, at number 11, I have Lauri Markkanen. Again, put up similar numbers to John Collins. He put up like 19 and 10 last year. The main difference for me here is that he can shoot threes really, really pretty well, a lot better than John Collins, so I put him above John Collins here, but similar in that their kind of production was similar. They're not much defensively, but offensively they're similar, except for Lauri has the better shooting, so I put him a step above. At 10, I have Al Horford, who I think is a good player in that he brings a defensive prowess to the floor that a lot of these other players haven't brought. Offensively, he's going to kind of just be like whatever your team needs. He could score you 17 a night. He could score you 11 a night. But he is a guy that can score at all levels, mid-range, post, and three-point shots. You can run the offense through him at like an elbow as a high-post center, and he can get some good assists. And again, he's a good defender, and he's a very good pickup for Philly. We haven't ever seen him full-time at power forward because last year he only played a part-time, and in Atlanta he was a center. So seeing him at power forward full-time will be interesting. At number 9, I have Julius Randle, a really good scorer. Some people might think he's really high here, but I think he's going to continue to improve. He is going to be like the number 1 option on the Knicks next year, so that should be interesting. This last year, people don't remember, but he put up like 22 and 11, 22 points and like 11 rebounds a game. It was a lot better than people realized, and he did it efficiently. He shot like 54% from the field, so I think he's better than people realize. I think he's a little underrated, and I think he'll continue to, well, in New York, I think people will take much more notice of him. At number 8, I have Jason Tatum, who I think will be starting at power forward for the Celtics with Gordon Hayward at small forward. Excuse me. He can score in a number of different ways. He can score off the dribble. He can create his own shot. He can spot up for threes. I hope that he just continues to develop a little bit because that's why I have him so high here. I think with Kyrie gone, he will be getting a few more shots, and I think they're slowly going to try and transition to being like the Jason Tatum team rather than the Kemba Walker team eventually. So for those reasons, I have him here. Defensively, not much of a presence, really. Just like an average defender. Next, I have Kevin Love, who, although he's coming off of an injury, I think this year he'll be fully healthy. And if we remember, Kevin Love, when healthy, is 18 and 12. So not a guy that we should be overlooking. Still a really good shooter, still really good, a lot of different facets on offense, really good in the post still, even though he doesn't get to do as much of that anymore. Maybe he will more this year since he'll be kind of like this offense's captain. Again, a poor defensive presence, but very good offensively. At number 6, I have Porzingis. I think that Porzingis is going to come back and be good. I think that he could have played like as early as last March, and they kept him out just to make sure he was healthy. I think he's basically the same player as Kevin Love, but I think I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt because he's a lot younger. But to me, they're like almost the same player, really, in a lot of different ways. Love is a little bit of a better shooter, but Porzingis is a little bit more athletic. Next, I have a guy who I'm ranking up here pretty high, but I have a high regard for. It's Pascal Siakam. He won Most Improved Player of the Year last year, and I think he's going to be like this Raptors' new best player. I think they're going to make him the focal point. I think it wouldn't be surprising to see him average like 22 points per game and 10 rebounds and 5 assists next year. He can kind of do some of everything. He's a good defender. He can shoot threes. He can drive a bit. I expect big things from Pascal Siakam, and I'm excited to see what an offense centered around him and Kyle Lowry looks like. Excuse me. Next, at number 4, I have Draymond Green. Again, people might think this is a little high, but I think that Draymond Green is still a really good NBA player. Still very strong defensively, even though he's sagged off from Defensive Player of the Year levels. I think he's still a well above average NBA defender. Can do some of everything. His shooting has gotten really bad, but he's still a really good floor general, and he's really actually more like the Warriors point guard than people realize, like getting like 8 assists per game. I think that's really valuable for that team. And I'm just interested to see how he does on a team without Klay, which is a team that he's never played on. He's always had Klay Thompson there. And without Durant there too, he'll probably be asked to do a lot more on offense than usual. His scoring will probably be up a bit, so it'll be interesting to see with him as more of an offensive focal point. Next, I have Blake Griffin, who came off what I would say is the best singular season of his career. He averaged like 25 and 10. And his added three-point shot's really what vaults him up here. He can score in just such a number of ways these days. It's really impressive. Again, not much on defense, but very athletic still. Can ball handle, which is a big thing. He can like initiate plays now and bring the ball up court if needed. That's a big addition for his game. Like his game a lot, and I'm excited to see what he can do with the added punch of Derrick Rose this year on that team. In second, I have Anthony Davis. Need I say more? When healthy, the guy's going to average 28 points, 13 rebounds, 2 blocks per game on good efficiencies. He can shoot some threes. He can shoot some mid-range. He's good backing down and working in the post. Very good defender. Probably the best defender on this list except for maybe the number 1 spot. But he's just a complete package. He can ball handle a little too. And so coming in at number 1, I have Giannis Antetokounmpo. Giannis is going to be playing power forward. He used to be more of a small forward, but now Milwaukee plays him at the power forward. He can do it all, and he's a 7-footer doing it. He's basically Kevin Durant without a jump shot on offense, but more athletic. And on defense, I think you could argue he's the best defender in the league. I think that's obvious from him coming in second place for Defensive Player of the Year. He can do some of everything on the NBA court besides shoot, but he still shoots like 32% from 3. It's not that high. It's like 20. It's in the mid-20s, but he can do more than people give him credit for. But he is still limited from that. But everything else, he's phenomenal. He's super athletic and everything like that. So one of the general takeaways I noticed from this video is that a lot of these guys, they're really like small forwards that in today's NBA are power forwards, and they're really at this position because they can shoot, not because they're good defenders whatsoever. I think going through this whole list, I could count maybe like of the 30 guys, maybe like 8 guys that I would call like good or at least well above average defenders. The rest were just there because they can shoot threes. An interesting trend for a position that's been constantly changing and evolving. But that's all I got for today, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you found this interesting, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.